This video is intended to help you understand how to navigate the practice test site for MCAP. MCAP is the name given to our Maryland statewide test. I'd like to begin by clarifying that the intended purpose of this site is not for your students to practice the content that you've been teaching all year long, but rather the intended purpose is to help your students become familiar with the testing platform so they will know which buttons to click and what tools are available to them while testing. This year, the 2020 MCAP testing window is from April 20th through June 5th. Check with your school's testing coordinator to find out the exact dates for your school, grade level, and content area. So you would begin by opening a browser window and typing in md.mypearsonsupport.com. You can see it up here at the top. You can also click the link that's in the MCAP resource folder that's in Schoology. You'd find that by going to your grade level mathematics folder and then looking for the MCAP resource folder. When you go to the MCAP practice test website, you're going to click right here at test preparation. You'll see a drop-down window and click on practice test. On this site, you'll see the tutorial that we're going to explore today. If you scroll down a bit, you'll also see that there's the ELA practice test, a math practice test, and be sure to explore the equation editor. These three tabs over here. Practice with equation editor. My pro tip for you is click on that, use it with students, have them open it, then you write a question and have students use page 1 to answer the mathematics, and then page 2 of this editor to explain why they did the steps that they did in the mathematics. There's not a place for you to print or save it. It's just a great place for kids to practice and then have them read and share each other's writing and critique each other as they develop their capacity to become better mathematical writers. All right, so let's go to the TestNav 8 tutorial. I'm going to begin by clicking here. And then anytime you get to a page in this writing, encourage your students to read it and give them time to read it or follow along as you read it aloud. Let's click Start. This is a sample tutorial. It has 24 questions. On this first page, it's an explanation of how to navigate through the pages by using the blue arrow. You'll see it here at the top. If I click the blue arrow, it will advance me to the next page. Notice I can also click back. Our benchmark tests that we take through MAP do not allow us to navigate forward and backwards because they're adaptive. At this time, the MCAP test, this test, is not adaptive. So we can navigate forward and backwards, which means that we'll talk in a little bit about being able to skip questions and bookmark questions and coming back to those questions. All right, so let's move on to page 2. This is the sign-in page. Your students do not need to sign in for this tutorial, but on test day, they will be given a username and password so that they can. On page 3, take a look at the red descriptors of each of the tools that are available at the top of the page. I'm going to briefly show you each page, but please make sure that you return to the pages so that you can go at your own pace and have time to actually read all of the words so you can understand how to navigate this tutorial so that when you use it with your students, it will be a fluid activity that you do with them. So my recommendation for using it with students is to open the site on your smartboard and then lead a guided exploration session and have your students follow along with you on their one-to-one devices. All right, let's take a look at page 4. Page 4 talks about that I can hover over top of each tool and it will tell me what that tool is for. Notice this is the centimeter ruler. This is an inch ruler. Protractor, take a look at this. There will also be a calculator available for some of the questions. Page 5 talks about the review button. The review button is up here at the top. When I click the review button, Notice that some of them have yellow dots and some of them do not. The ones that do not have yellow dots, that means that I have already answered those questions. The ones with yellow dots, that means that I have not answered them. Now, on the real test, if I go to question number 7 and I do not answer it and move on to question number 8, the yellow dot will remain there. So when I click the review button, it will show me that I did not answer question number 7 and I could go back to it. I can also click bookmark to bookmark a page. So notice when I click review now, it will show me that page 5 has been bookmarked. I can click forward to question 6. I can click back to question 1 from this review bar. So let's go ahead and proceed to question 6. On question 6, this is what the page looks like when students end their test. So at this time, you would want to talk to your students about the advantages of answering every single question. On MCAP, you can submit your test without answering everything. But there's a strong disadvantage to that because you're guaranteed to miss it if you don't at least attempt an answer. So make it a class rule that they never submit final answer unless the yellow circle says 0 questions were not answered. In this case, I have 4 that were not answered, so I would certainly not want to submit my final answers at this time. Let's take a look at page 7. Page 7 tells me how to exit the test. I would go up here to the top, there's a drop down, and I would sign out of the test. There's an explanation here of how do I sign out of tests and why would I sign out of the test. Page 8 gives me an overview of all the tools that would be available, and then the next pages that follow will simply show me one by one how to use them. The pointer tool, the ruler and the protractor, and then there's some practice with the ruler. So let's pause here for a minute and practice with this. So notice that there's a lot of measuring tools up here. There's an inch ruler, a centimeter ruler, and a protractor. By hovering over it, I can see what type of tool it is. How would we know which tool to use to measure this? Right, we would need to take a look at the question. And in this case, the question says measure the length of the line in centimeters, which means I need the centimeter ruler. This is the inch ruler. This is the centimeter ruler. When I click it, a ruler will appear. I can move the ruler by left clicking and dragging. But do you notice that the ruler doesn't line up to the line? Your students may not intuitively know how to adjust this, and they might just simply try to estimate and go, well, that looks like it's about. We really want them to measure it. So teach them that by grabbing the circles on the end, they can rotate the ruler. And we want to rotate it so it's parallel to the line. Then I can slide it over to the line. At this point, I would want to talk about ruler types. Now, maybe you've had the discussion already that some rulers, the 0 is at the edge. On other rulers, there's a designated line for the 0. What type of ruler are we using? Yes, we're using one that has a designated line. So we would want to make sure we line up our object with the designated line in order to measure. And I see that this is about 8.5 centimeters long, just over 8.5. All right, let's go on to page 12. Page 12, they talk about the calculator tool. Now, the calculator will be available to 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade students on specific types of questions. Questions that are really assessing their reasoning skills or their modeling skills will have a calculator available to them. Questions that are assessing their calculation skills, there will not be a calculator icon even available to them. So make them aware that sometimes questions will have a calculator icon, and in that case, encourage them to use the calculator when they need it. Now, a little bit of a warning here. If there is no calculator icon and the student decides that they want to go find an online calculator because you've been practicing with them in class, how to find online calculators. If they leave the testing window, the test will close. This test does not allow students to open a second window. The test will abort, and they will not be able to finish their test without having administrative intervention. For this tutorial, that does not happen, but they need to be aware that on a real test, that if they leave the site to go look up the product of 9 times 8, or to find a great music video by Beyonce to play in the background while they're taking the test, their test will close. All right, let's continue. Page 13 lets them practice using the calculator. 14, they talk about the Eliminator tool. The thing to note here is if I eliminate A, B, and C, the computer does not know that I want D as my answer unless I actually click the button for D. Also, your students need to be made aware that they can eliminate the correct answer by accident. The computer will not stop them from doing that. On page 15, they get a chance to practice the Eliminator tool. 16 talks about the highlighting tool. You might have noticed that I used that earlier when we were using the ruler. Encourage or discourage over highlighting. Then they'll get into accessibility features that are located up here at the top right. And then on the next pages, it will have them look through it. So there's a line mask reader. And this line mask reader can be expanded larger by dragging the corners. The window can be larger or the shade can be larger. This is helpful to some students, not all students, when they need to focus on just a specific part of the text. They can practice the line mask reader, but remind students they do not have to use these tools. They're simply available to them. The next one is the zoom tool. The zoom tool really is only useful for small things. Notice this, when I enable the magnifier, it gives me this square box. This would be really inconvenient for me to use as a reader. So this is really useful if I was trying to read a graph and I needed to see if the number said 1/2 or 1/3. It wasn't quite clear. I might use this to magnify where it fell on the graph. Page 21 talks about changing the foreground and the background colors. For some students, this will be a very exciting feature that they can use. Make sure that they have computer playground time to play with this long before the test. They absolutely can adjust the contrast of their screen, but that decision of what they're planning to do should be made well before the test day so that they're not using valuable test time adjusting these colors. For some students, they might prefer that there is not a white background, but a cream background. This gives a little bit of a softer lighting to the eye. Some people, I'm one of them, I often prefer a dark background so there's not so much light entering my eye, and I like to have the white lettering. Let them play with this, but then have them pick the one that they're planning to use, and then they should stick with that and use that one. All right? All right, as we continue, page 22. 22 is talking about answer masking. Answer masking allows me to visually eliminate answers that I think are not the answer and lets me focus on just the two that I'm left with. I can unmask by simply clicking again. Text-to-speech. On text-to-speech, this is not a feature that is available to all of your students, but the easiest way to mention this without causing too much unneeded discussion is to say, you might see a megaphone icon that allows you to listen. If you see this, you can click on it and have it read to you. All right, so we are nearing the end of the tutorial, and this is the page students will get to at the end of the tutorial. If this was my last page on MCAP, should I go ahead and hit Submit Final Answer? No. This says that I have not answered 4 questions. Make sure we click the Review tab, and I go back and I find those 4 questions I did not answer and go back and answer those. As always, reach out if you have questions. We're happy to assist you as you work to move your students forward. Thanks so much.